I've discovered something that all of my viral videos have in common, and that is specific editing techniques. Now, I'm going to share some of my favorites with you today, and I promise there will be one that you haven't heard of before. So let's jump into editing. This first editing technique is built off the foundation of a technique that I'm sure a majority of you are already familiar with. You can play back your songs and press your keyboard to add markers at the beat of the music. And this can be helpful for rapidly cutting down your footage directly to where you want it to cut on the beat of the music. However, this is just the tip of the iceberg, and based off this, we can actually do a lot of really cool advanced techniques. We will be editing in Final Cut, but these principles apply to any editor. If you feel like I'm going too fast, I've created a PDF companion to help you along and just share all the tips in an easy, digestible format. Let's explore a slightly more advanced technique, one that I'm sure a lot of you are actually experimenting with already. Often there might be sections of a song that you want to lengthen by a little bit to help the dynamics of your story. Maybe the song goes to the chorus earlier than you want and it changes the dynamics. So you want to hang on this nice acoustic rhythmic section just a little bit longer. You can take sections, cut them on the beat, and then just duplicate them. And then maybe you chuck in a little bit of a crossfade, cross dissolve, and call it a day. Now, in my experience, this works about 50% of the time and you're good there. But other times it doesn't quite work, and this repeat point becomes kind of a bit of a nag. Especially as you're editing, you just notice it. And it's these subconscious things that I think start to add up, especially in the experience of a whole video. So we can actually hide this repeat point way more efficiently if we shift it just past where the beat is. First, I'm going to change the color label of these two sections so you can see this transition more clearly. So what I like to do is line it up like normal, and then without changing the timing, actually shift where the songs are mixing. This can either be right before or right after the beat. If you shift this cross dissolve to an area that doesn't have really loud dynamics, for example, in between two beats, it often hides it way more seamlessly. Let's listen back to this new version. Now again, if we listen to the previous example, this is a big improvement, but we are just getting started here. So you can now take these sections that you've worked on and duplicate them multiple times now that you've finessed where this edit point could exist. Now, if you want to keep editing this song, it's actually best to nest this as a sub-layer. So you can take all these clips, compound them or nest them, and then when you do your keyframes to change the dynamics of the song, you don't have to fiddle across multiple clips, which is very helpful for working quickly once you've decided on which sections you want to lengthen. This editing secret has saved my butt more times than I can count. I most recently used it in my last solo alone adventure video where I wanted to lengthen just this exact section of a song. This ability to be able to manipulate song and different sound elements is something that I look up to in my favorite editors, and I'm always trying to improve in my own work. I have a few more rapid fire music related tips. To share those, I'm going to head over and grab another song. I highly recommend turning on highlights mode because then you'll get little snippets of some of the best portions of the song. So as you're listening through to different tracks, you get a better sense of what they're actually going to sound like. And whenever you find tracks that you like, make sure that you favorite them or add them to a playlist, even if it's not going to be used in the project that you're working on. So I'm constantly trying to find good sounds. And an artist that I know that has great music is my friend Oliver Michael. I've used a ton of his music in my projects before, and you can actually get his stuff over on ARTLIST. And I want to use his song Empire for our next example. And something I don't think enough people do is when they're just browsing through the music page and they find a song they like, click through to the song and actually go to the artist's page, because there's a good chance if you like one song, you're going to like a lot of other tracks from that same artist. Sometimes you want to fade out the end of a song, but there isn't enough duration to fade out in a way that feels satisfying. Maybe you only got 3 or 4 seconds for your fade out before something else happens in the song that's distracting. So in this instance, I want to fade it out longer. So what you can do is time ramp the end of the song right at the point where there's still a little sliver of song left before the next thing starts, like the next note is hit. And then you can apply some reverb and keyframe the change in the reverb for this point where you lengthen the song. And then what you'll see is the sound that you're fading out will then echo and reverberate for a while longer, giving you a lot more natural of a fade out. And sometimes you might need to come in and keyframe things a little bit to finesse it, because when you bring in more reverb, it might bring up the presence of the song. So you can fiddle with things here a bit. But here's an example where we got almost 4 times the length out of a fade out simply by using this trick. If you're feeling a little overwhelmed at the pace that we're moving through things here, I've got a more detailed write-up for you in the description going into a little bit more detail on how to execute on these different techniques. Another awesome effect that you can do directly on the songs is using a high or low pass filter to create a specific feel. So I like doing this. If you cut to underwater footage, it kind of feels more underwater. I've got some more techniques for editing to the beat of the music, but I want to talk about instrumentals, specifically mixing those with vocal versions. And this is a really helpful technique. Oftentimes I gravitate towards the instrumental version of a song because I'm going to have sections of talking in my videos, and you don't want lyrical versions of songs mixing with talking because it makes it confusing to hear. So if I go over to ARTLIST and I find a vocal version of a song that I like, they often have instrumental versions as well, or even versions with stems. And with stems, we can do some really cool stuff that is going to be deeper in this video. Some awesome, really, I promise it's sweet. But with just the instrumental and the vocal version, if we bring those over into our editor, let's say we only want the vocals to come in at the chorus. We don't want it during the verses. So what we want to do is stack the 2 songs on top of each other in our timeline. So now what we can do is keyframe gain changes between the instrumental and the vocal version, and this will allow us to seamlessly transition between the 2 songs. However, this can become a little bit tricky if we want to change the dynamics of the song to match the scene that we're working with other keyframes on top of this. So to speed up the process, it's actually best to create this as a sub-sequence, as a compound or nested clip. And if you've set your audio roles correctly, when you're back on your main timeline, you can expand these, mix them how you would like, collapse them, and then make your keyframe adjustments over top. So here's an example of a sequence that I just chopped together quickly here for you, where you can see, hey, we're playing through the verse right now, and it's just a normal instrumental version. And then we transition over to the chorus and the vocals come in. That's pretty neat, eh? Well, the next section, I'm hoping to blow your mind a bit, but we've got some unfinished business with editing to the beat of the music. And the reason why I'm excited to share these tips with you is that this is all stuff that I wish that I knew earlier, and I've observed this in other viral long-form content. And you might be thinking at this point, Levi, you haven't done any fancy transitions. And my counter to that is, I used to think that editing was some magic trick to try steal people's attention, and certainly that style exists in forms of retention editing. But what I really gravitate towards is editing that allows the story, the content to shine. And this is a theme I've noticed in my studying of other viral videos in a lot of my favorite creators, is that the editing isn't calling attention to itself, it's getting out of the way of the story. And that's where these techniques make a big difference. And I've experienced that in my video projects. I've accumulated over 50 million views, long form views, and 30 million of those are actually here on my own channel. And of course, not every video's gone viral, but the ones that have all share these same editing techniques. And of course, the concept and the actual premise of the video is the most important part, the actual content itself. But the editing is a really critical part because this is the lens through which the audience experiences the project, is the exact way that it's edited. Now, a tool that's been present across all of my viral videos, going all the way back to 2016 with my first massive documentary, Untethered, is the single best investment I've made into the audio work on my projects, which is ARTLIST, our partner in this video. And I reached out and asked, can we do a video together? Because their services have continually improved over the years, and it's a big value generator for me in my video work in multiple ways. Of course, what I love about them the most is their massive catalog of easily searchable, high quality music. And I can't tell you how many times their sound effects library has come in completely clutch when I've messed up my sound on location and I just need some footsteps, or I need a car driving by, or some wind to put under my drone shots. They seem to have basically every recorded sound you could possibly be searching for. And with ARTLIST Max, you unlock so much more than simply just sounds for your videos. It's kind of wild how much is included, from LUTs for color grading to easy to modify animation templates that I've used many times here on this channel. I think ARTLIST is the best investment of any subscription service you're going to use in the creation of your videos. The resources they have are just unmatched, and you can use them in anything, which is so critical, and you can use however much you want, which is also incredible if you like downloading and remixing tons of different effects. Now, in the description, I've got a link for you where you can get 2 months free off your subscription, and this is an incredible value. Thank you, ARTLIST, for partnering with me in this video, and also for you, the viewer, for checking out our sponsor. Let's go back to editing to the beat of the music because we have some unfinished business here. You can use the dynamics of the song to help cue you when you want to change the length of your cuts, to pivot and shift pacing. You can also make sure that you're not always editing exactly on the same beat of the music, because then it starts to feel predictable, so you can lengthen, kind of surprise the viewer. What I like to do is sometimes line up the beat of the music, that marker that we placed earlier, with an action point in the edit itself when something meaningful motion-wise happens on screen, or when the main subject matter of your piece realizes something. You can do this with a physical action like putting a raft into the water. If it makes a sound, you can line up those sounds. I've also found it to be really effective for time remapping. So if I want the exact point where we time remap through a drone shot to line up with the beat of the music, this becomes a lot easier when we have some of those markers placed on the timeline. And you can just look at the waveforms if you want, but having those markers is nice because things then snap to those different points. Now, I hope I blow your mind a little bit with this next section. So I really like using atmospheres or tonally based hits in my projects. So things that have musical elements in them in the sound design. Now, oftentimes, if you try to mix those tonal elements with actual songs, they're going to clash because they're in different keys. And this isn't just from mixing sound effects with songs. It actually comes from transitioning between two songs too quickly near each other. That adjustment in the key can sometimes feel kind of abrasive. So we're going to use some stems that we've downloaded from ARTLIST, and now more and more they're actually adding the key of the music alongside these, which is really helpful. But if the song you're using you don't know the key of, I just go to Google and type song key finder and find the key that the music is actually in. And I like to add that into the file name when it's downloaded on my computer for just easy reference in the future. As well, with sound effects, you can find a sound effect or a tonal atmosphere sound that matches with that. In this example, we're going to use a piano hit that transitions into kind of a resonant tone. And I want to match that piano hit in the same key of the song that it's transitioning into. Okay, a quick note on stems. These are awesome. They're super effective for taking all the techniques we're talking about today and just leveling them up. So you can stack the stems on top of each other in a compound clip and then disable or enable different aspects of the song. You can loop other sections easier. One of my personal favorite ways to do this from an editing perspective for building sound beds is pulling up the percussion tracks. I really like rhythmic sections. So usually the drum section of a song ends up being one of my favorites to use from stems, because sometimes the melody of a song can be kind of overwhelming or distracting. So pulling that away can really be effective here. But let's go back. Okay, so we've got our stems, we've got our sound effect, and they're in the same key, and now we can transition them. So in this example, let's transition out of our song at an earlier point and use this piano hit to kind of resonate out of that song. So if we line it up, we can fade out the different stems. And here's an example of how we could do that. You can also take this and use it at the start. And this is a good example to talk about some other techniques where using sound bed layers and atmospheric sounds are really important for making your video feel immersive, especially if the footage you recorded on location doesn't have great sound. And I often use wind puffies on my mic, so they don't capture kind of the atmospheric wind sound. So I like adding that back in, or maybe it's a drone shot where you can't hear anything at all. Adding just simple sound beds under your drone shots is an easy way to immediately take your projects and make it feel more immersive. And then we're going to use the piano hit to transition us out of this moment where I'm sitting by the fire into a drone shot and key us up and be ready for the song that's going to follow in afterwards. sometimes you have songs or sound assets that you really want to mix tonally, but they don't match, and you don't have a version of it that does match. Now, this technique I haven't heard anyone talk about before, but you can actually figure out the keys that they're in, figure out the difference in semitones between those keys. I always have to Google it because I'm very bad with musical theory. I'm a drummer, I'm not a musician. And what you can then do is take in an effect like pitch shifting and adjust it by the correct amount of semitones to bring it into the right key. Now, if we listen to these two different examples here, if we transition out of one sound effect and we want to build into a song here, it works, but it's a little bit awkward, and those with perfect pitch out there are going to be annoyed with it. So if we pitch shift this sound effect, it would actually merge with the upcoming song much better. Come on, that's pretty cool. Now, if at this point of the video, you're like, Levi, I already knew all of these techniques. Well, take your hand, pat yourself on the back because you're probably a better editor than I am, and share one of your best tips down in the comments because we always like learning from each other. And of course, if you want to see some of my adventure films, go watch the playlist. There's some awesome projects. I'd love for you to see them. That's it for this one. Remember, life's better when you make stuff. Peace.